I'm Amber, I'm 28, and a week before my wedding, I overheard my sister planning to humiliate me in front of everyone so my fiancé would leave me at the altar. She was literally on the phone with some guy, promising him $500 to show up and claim he was my secret lover. I stood in my own hallway, listening to my little sister destroy my life like it was just another Tuesday. Instead of confronting her right then, I walked back to my room, closed the door quietly, and made a phone call of my own. By the time she finished her scheming, I had already set my own plan in motion. What she didn't know was that her little performance was about to backfire spectacularly. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this story starts way before wedding invitations and hired actors. 12 years ago, when I was 16 and Holly was 13, our parents died in a car accident. One minute, we were a normal family arguing about curfews and allowance. The next minute, I was standing in a social worker's office being told I could either take legal guardianship of my sister or watch her go into foster care. I was just a kid myself, but Holly was my baby sister. I couldn't let strangers raise her. So I signed those papers, dropped out of my senior year activities, and got a job at the local diner to support us both. The insurance money and our parents' modest savings were split equally between us, but it was locked in trust funds until we turned 18. I used every penny of my portion for our living expenses, Holly's school clothes, and keeping us afloat. Holly was angry about everything back then, and I get it. Losing your parents at 13 is devastating, but instead of grieving together, she took all that rage and aimed it directly at me. Every rule I made, every boundary I set, every time I had to be the adult instead of her big sister, she fought me. She snuck out, skipped school, hung around with kids who were nothing but trouble. I tried everything: family counseling, changing schools, even letting her visit her friends more often, hoping she'd settle down. Nothing worked. The day she turned 18, she marched into the bank, withdrew every cent of her inheritance, and disappeared without even leaving a note. Just gone. After everything I'd sacrificed to keep us together, she couldn't wait to get away from me. For 2 years, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no way of knowing if she was even alive. I finished high school through night classes, went to community college on scholarships, and slowly built a life for myself. I won't lie. Part of me was relieved. I could finally be 20 years old instead of playing mom to a teenager who hated me for it. Then one day, Holly showed up at my apartment door with 2 suitcases and that same defiant look she'd perfected as a teenager. Except now she was 23, broke, and apparently homeless. The money was gone, spent on what she called living her life and finding herself. Translation: parties, bad boyfriends, and a series of get-rich-quick schemes that left her with nothing but debt and regret. "I need a place to stay," she announced, pushing past me into my small but tidy living room. "Just temporarily, until I get back on my feet." I should have said no. Every rational part of my brain was screaming to protect myself, to remember how she'd left without a word after I'd given up everything for her. But she was still my sister, and despite everything, I couldn't turn her away. That temporary arrangement stretched into 2 years. Holly moved into my spare room and proceeded to treat my home like a hotel with free maid service. She'd leave dishes in the sink for days, use up all the hot water, and invite strangers over without asking. When I'd bring up basic house rules, she'd either ignore me completely or launch into speeches about how I wasn't her mother and couldn't control her anymore. The worst part was watching her cycle through the same destructive patterns. Bad job after bad job, each one ending in drama and someone else being blamed for her problems. Guys who didn't appreciate her, and friends who were just jealous of her potential. Every crisis became my emergency. Every problem became my responsibility to fix. I paid her share of groceries when she was between paychecks. I covered her car insurance when she claimed the payment system wasn't working. I even lent her money for a business opportunity that turned out to be another pyramid scheme. My savings account, which I'd carefully built up over the years, started dwindling as Holly's needs became increasingly expensive. But I told myself this was what family did. We helped each other through tough times. Holly had been through trauma too, and maybe she just needed more time to figure things out. Besides, despite everything, she was the only family I had left. Losing our parents had taught me how quickly people could be taken away, and I didn't want to lose my sister too. Then I met David. He was a teacher at the elementary school where I worked as a reading specialist, and he was everything I'd never dared to hope for. Kind, patient, genuinely funny, and somehow completely unimpressed by my complicated family situation. When I told him about Holly living with me, he just nodded and said, "Family is complicated, I get it." David and I had been dating for 8 months when he proposed. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life was heading in the right direction. We'd planned a small but beautiful wedding at the local botanical garden. Nothing fancy but meaningful. I was finally going to have my own family, a fresh start, a chance to be happy without constantly managing someone else's chaos. Holly's reaction to our engagement was strange. At first, she seemed excited, asking about dress shopping and venue details like she genuinely wanted to be involved. But then I started noticing little things. Comments about how David was probably too good to be true, and how men always show their real selves after marriage. She'd make jokes about divorce statistics when we were wedding planning, then laugh like it was all harmless teasing. Have you ever experienced someone slowly poisoning your happiness with tiny doses of negativity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The comments escalated into actions. Holly started inserting herself into our relationship in ways that made me uncomfortable. She'd suggest girls' nights on evenings when David and I had plans, then act hurt when I chose to spend time with my fiancé instead. She'd text him directly about things she claimed to need help with, always when I wasn't around to assist. "Your sister seems to need a lot of support," David mentioned one evening after Holly had called him to help move furniture while I was at work. "Is she always this dependent?" I made excuses because that's what I'd been doing for years. Holly was still adjusting, still figuring things out, still dealing with abandonment issues from our parents' death. But privately, I was starting to feel suffocated by her constant needs and increasingly uncomfortable with her behavior around David. The breaking point should have come when I caught Holly flirting with David at my own engagement party. She was standing too close, laughing too loudly at his stories, and touching his arm every chance she got. When I pulled her aside and asked what she was doing, she acted shocked that I would suggest anything inappropriate. "I'm just being friendly," she said with wide, innocent eyes. "David's going to be my brother-in-law. I want us to get along. Isn't that what you want?" What I wanted was for my sister to respect my relationship and stop making every gathering about her need for attention. But saying that out loud would make me sound petty and jealous, which I'm pretty sure was exactly her goal. Things got worse after the engagement party. Holly started having emergencies that required David's immediate assistance. Her car would break down when I was unavailable. Her apartment key would mysteriously stop working when she needed to retrieve something important. Or she'd need help reaching something on a high shelf that couldn't possibly wait until I got home. Each time, David helped because that's the kind of man he is. He saw my sister in distress and responded with kindness, never questioning whether these situations were genuine emergencies or carefully orchestrated opportunities for Holly to monopolize his time and attention. "She's been through a lot," he'd remind me when I expressed frustration. "Losing her parents so young, then being on her own for years. She probably just wants to feel included in our family." Our family. The phrase should have made me happy, but instead it highlighted my growing fear that Holly was systematically inserting herself into the relationship I'd worked so hard to build. She wasn't trying to be included. She was trying to replace me. The realization hit me fully one evening when I came home from work to find Holly and David cooking dinner together in my kitchen. They were laughing and working in perfect sync. And for a moment, I felt like an intruder in my own home. They looked like a couple, comfortable and natural together in a way that made my stomach clench with jealousy. "Amber!" Holly called cheerfully when she noticed me in the doorway. "David was teaching me how to make that pasta dish you love. I thought it would be nice to surprise you." But it didn't feel like a surprise for me. It felt like a performance designed to show me how easily she could slip into my place, how naturally she and David worked together, how unnecessary I was to their dynamic. That night, after David went home, I confronted Holly directly. I told her I was uncomfortable with how often she needed his help, how she seemed to be deliberately creating situations that excluded me, and how her behavior was affecting my relationship. "You're being paranoid," she said, but there was something in her eyes that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. "I'm just trying to build a relationship with the man my sister is going to marry. Isn't that normal?" Normal sisters didn't systematically undermine each other's relationships. Normal sisters didn't create fake emergencies to steal their siblings' time and attention. But Holly had never been normal, and I was starting to realize that her behavior wasn't accidental or thoughtless, it was calculated. 3 weeks before the wedding, Holly crossed a line that should have ended everything between us permanently. I came home early from work with a migraine to find her sitting on David's lap in my living room. Not cuddling, exactly, but close enough that they sprang apart when they heard my key in the door. "Amber!" David stood up immediately, his face flushed with what I hoped was embarrassment rather than guilt. "You're home early. Are you feeling okay?" Holly remained seated, smoothing her hair with deliberate casualness. "I was just showing David some photos from when we were kids. He wanted to see what you looked like with braces." The explanation was plausible, the kind of innocent interaction that would be normal between future in-laws. But the way they jumped apart when I entered, the guilty look on David's face, and Holly's satisfied smirk told a different story. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand explanations and set ultimatums and force them both to acknowledge what had just happened. Instead, I swallowed my rage and played along with their charade, because confronting the truth would mean admitting that my sister was actively trying to steal my fiancé and that my fiancé might be letting her. I need to lie down, I said quietly, retreating to my bedroom while they continued their innocent conversation in my living room. That night, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I installed a small recording app on my phone and started documenting Holly's behavior. Not because I planned to use it against her, but because I was starting to doubt my own perceptions. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe my stress about the wedding was making me see problems that didn't exist. The recordings proved I wasn't imagining anything. Holly was absolutely deliberately trying to seduce David, and she was doing it with a level of calculation that was both impressive and terrifying. Over the next week, I captured her making suggestive comments when she thought I couldn't hear, accidentally walking out of the bathroom in just a towel when David was visiting, and most damning of all, telling a friend on the phone that she was working on breaking them up before the wedding, because David deserved someone more fun and less uptight. The evidence was crushing, but it was also liberating. I wasn't losing my mind, and I wasn't being paranoid. My sister was genuinely trying to destroy my relationship, and now I had proof. The final straw came exactly 1 week before our wedding date. I was supposed to be having my final dress fitting, but the seamstress had to reschedule due to a family emergency. Instead of going straight home, I decided to stop by David's apartment to surprise him with takeout from his favorite restaurant. I used my key to let myself in, calling his name as I entered. No response, but I could hear voices coming from his bedroom. My heart started racing as I recognized Holly's distinctive laugh, followed by David's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. I crept down the hallway, telling myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Holly had needed help with something, and David was just being his usual helpful self. Maybe I was overreacting based on everything that had happened before. But when I reached the bedroom doorway, I saw Holly sitting on David's bed wearing nothing but one of his t-shirts, while he sat in his desk chair looking deeply uncomfortable. "Holly, this isn't appropriate," he was saying as I watched from the shadows. "Amber is my fiancée and you're her sister. This needs to stop." "But it doesn't have to stop," Holly replied, leaning forward in a way that made David look anywhere but at her. "She doesn't have to know. I've seen how you look at me, David. I know you feel this too." My hands were shaking as I held up my phone, recording every word of what came next. Holly continued her seduction attempt while David repeatedly told her to put her clothes back on and leave. She talked about how they could be together, how I would never find out, how she could make him happier than I ever could. Finally, David stood up and firmly told her that if she didn't get dressed and leave immediately, he was going to call me and tell me everything. That's when Holly's facade cracked completely. "Fine," she snapped, jumping off the bed to grab her clothes. "But this isn't over, David. You're making a mistake marrying her. Amber is boring and controlling, and she'll never make you happy the way I could. You'll realize that eventually, and when you do, I'll be waiting." I had heard enough, more than enough. As quietly as I had entered, I slipped back out of the apartment and sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking with rage and betrayal and relief that David had passed a test I never wanted to give him. But Holly's words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. She was right about that, but not in the way she expected. This was far from over, but now I held all the cards. That evening, when David called to tell me about Holly's visit and her inappropriate behavior, I acted surprised and hurt but not shocked. We had a long conversation about boundaries and family dynamics, and he assured me that he would never betray my trust or let Holly come between us. I believed him, because I had seen his rejection of her advances with my own eyes. But I also knew that Holly wasn't going to give up easily. She had spent 2 years systematically undermining my happiness, and I had spent 2 years making excuses for her behavior. Not anymore. It was time for Holly to learn that actions have consequences, and some betrayals are unforgivable. 2 days after catching Holly in David's bedroom, I was walking past her room when I heard her on another phone call. This time, she wasn't being subtle about her intentions. She was finalizing details with someone named Marcus about disrupting my wedding ceremony. "Saturday at 3, she was saying. "The Botanical Garden on Maple Street. You'll need to wait until they ask if anyone objects, then stand up and say you've been having an affair with the bride for 6 months. I'll act shocked and supportive, like I had no idea. Make it dramatic cry if you can. I need everyone to believe it's real." I pressed myself against the wall, recording every word as Holly negotiated payment and rehearsed the script this actor was supposed to follow. $500 to destroy my wedding day, humiliate me in front of everyone I cared about, and give her the perfect excuse to comfort David when he inevitably called off the ceremony. The groom is a teacher, so he's really conservative about this stuff, Holly continued. Once he thinks she's been cheating, he'll never take her back. Then she'll probably move out. And I can be there to help him through the heartbreak. It's perfect. Perfect. She thought destroying my life was perfect. I had heard enough scheming to last a lifetime. But this was different. This wasn't just flirtation or inappropriate behavior. This was a calculated plan to humiliate me publicly and steal my fiancé. Holly had finally crossed a line that I couldn't ignore or rationalize away. Instead of confronting her immediately, I walked calmly to my room and called David. When he answered, I could hear the smile in his voice, probably assuming I was calling about last-minute wedding details. "Hey, beautiful. What's up? I need to see you tonight," I said. "There's something important we need to discuss." When David arrived an hour later, I played him the recording of Holly's phone conversation. I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief to anger as he realized the extent of her manipulation. This wasn't just a sister with boundary issues. This was someone actively trying to destroy our relationship. "She hired an actor?" he repeated, staring at my phone like it might suddenly reveal a different conversation. "She's actually planning to have someone lie about having an affair with you?" "That's just the finale," I said, showing him the other recordings I'd collected over the past week. "She's been working up to this for months. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below." David listened to every recording, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished playing the evidence, he was quiet for a long time, processing the magnitude of Holly's betrayal. "I'm so sorry," he finally said. "I knew she was being inappropriate, but I never imagined she was planning something this elaborate. You must have felt so alone dealing with this." "I kept thinking I was overreacting," I admitted. "She's my sister, and she's been through so much. I made excuses for her behavior because I didn't want to believe she was capable of something like this." David took my hands in his voice firm with resolve. "What do you want to do? We could confront her now, call off the wedding until this is resolved. Or we could—" "I have a better idea," I interrupted, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "What if we get married tomorrow instead?" David blinked. "Tomorrow? Think about it. Holly's plan only works if we follow her timeline. She expects us to show up Saturday, completely unprepared for her surprise. But what if we're already married when her actor makes his dramatic entrance?" The more I talked through the idea, the more it made sense. We could have a small ceremony with just our closest friends as witnesses, then let Holly play out her elaborate scheme to an empty venue. By the time she realized what had happened, we'd be married and probably on our honeymoon. "It would serve her right," David agreed, warming to the plan. "After everything she's put you through, let her waste her money and her time on a wedding that isn't happening." We spent the next 3 hours calling our officiant, our photographer, and our 4 closest friends to arrange an impromptu ceremony for Friday afternoon. Everyone was shocked by the sudden change, but when we explained that we had family issues to navigate, they all agreed to keep the real wedding completely secret. "What about your dress?" asked my maid of honor, Sarah, when I called to fill her in. "I'll pick it up tomorrow morning," I said. "Holly thinks I'm getting my nails done, so she won't suspect anything." By midnight, we had successfully rearranged our entire wedding without Holly having any idea what was happening. The botanical garden was available Friday afternoon for a small ceremony. The photographer could do a quick session before the original Saturday time slot, and our friends were excited to be part of what felt like a delicious secret. As David kissed me goodnight, he smiled with something that looked like anticipation rather than pre-wedding nerves. "I can't wait to marry you tomorrow," he said, "and I really can't wait to see Holly's face when she realizes her plan failed." Friday morning, I woke up and went through the motions of a normal day. Holly was already gone, supposedly running errands for her own outfit for tomorrow's ceremony. I picked up my dress, got my hair done, and told everyone who asked that I was trying to stay calm before the big day. At 2 o'clock, I met David, Sarah, his best man Jake, and our photographer at the botanical garden, the same beautiful venue where Holly thought she was going to humiliate me, except today it was actually going to be the site of my wedding. The ceremony was perfect in ways I never could have planned. Small, intimate, genuine, with only people who truly loved and supported us in attendance. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to our union, we all smiled, knowing that the person who would have objected wasn't there to do it. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and David kissed me as my husband for the first time while our friends cheered and our photographer captured every moment. After the ceremony, we went to our favorite restaurant for a small celebration dinner. I felt lighter than I had in months, married to the man I loved and finally free from Holly's manipulation. We toasted to our new marriage and to the fact that Holly's elaborate plan was going to backfire spectacularly. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Sarah asked as we shared dessert. "About the confrontation, I mean?" "Not anymore," I realized as I said it. I've spent 2 years walking on eggshells around Holly, trying to manage her emotions and fix her problems. Tomorrow, she'll finally face the consequences of her choices. David squeezed my hand under the table. "We're in this together now," he reminded me. "Whatever happens with Holly, you're not dealing with it alone anymore." That evening, we checked into a hotel under David's name, planning to spend our wedding night actually celebrating instead of worrying about Holly's schemes. I turned off my phone after texting Sarah to let me know if anything interesting happened at the house. For the first time in years, I fell asleep feeling completely peaceful. Holly could execute her plan perfectly, and it wouldn't matter because I was already married to David and completely done with her manipulative games. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Saturday morning, I woke up as Mrs. David Thompson, and the feeling was better than I had imagined. We ordered room service, read the newspaper in bed, and I finally allowed myself to feel excited about our honeymoon trip to Ireland that we'd be leaving for on Monday. At noon, Sarah texted me. "Holly's been calling you all morning. She seems frantic about some last-minute wedding details. Should I tell her anything?" "Tell her I'm getting ready and can't be disturbed," I replied. "Let her think everything is going according to her plan." David and I spent the afternoon doing normal things, lunch at a cafe, walking through downtown, acting like a regular married couple on their first day of marriage. It felt surreal to be so calm when I knew Holly was probably putting the finishing touches on her scheme to destroy my life. At 2:30, Sarah sent another update. "Holly left the house with some guy I don't recognize. She looked really excited. The actor must be here." I showed David the text, and we both started laughing. After months of stress and manipulation, Holly was finally going to get what she deserved. We were tempted to drive by the botanical garden to watch her reaction when she realized what had happened, but decided we were too mature for that level of pettiness. Actually, no, we weren't too mature. We drove by. From across the street, we could see a small crowd gathered at the garden entrance, our wedding guests, arriving for a ceremony that wasn't going to happen. Holly was there in a stunning blue dress, playing the role of supportive sister perfectly, greeting everyone with hugs and excitement about the wedding. "She's really committed to this performance," David observed as we watched her direct people toward the ceremony space. "She always was dramatic," I replied, feeling surprisingly detached from the scene. Even as a kid, everything had to be a production. At exactly 3 o'clock, Holly's phone started ringing. We couldn't hear the conversation, but we could see her confusion as she answered, then her panic as she realized something was wrong. She started looking around frantically, probably wondering where the bride was for her own wedding. That's when I decided it was time to make my call. I dialed Holly's number, watching from across the street as she fumbled to answer her phone while trying to manage increasingly confused wedding guests. "Amber!" She practically screamed into the phone. "Where are you? The ceremony is supposed to start right now. Everyone is here waiting." I took a deep breath, savoring the moment I'd been building toward for months. "Oh, didn't I tell you?" I said, keeping my voice light and casual. "The wedding was yesterday." Complete silence. I could see Holly freeze in place across the street, her mouth actually hanging open as she processed what I'd just said. "Yesterday?" she finally managed. "What do you mean yesterday?" "I mean David and I got married yesterday afternoon right there in the same garden where you're standing. Beautiful ceremony, really intimate, just our closest friends." I watched Holly's face go through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror as she realized her plan had been completely useless. But the invitation said today, "Everyone's here. The photographer, the officiant, Oh, those people aren't for my wedding," I interrupted cheerfully. "They're for your performance. You know, the one where your actor friend Marcus was going to claim he'd been having an affair with me." Another long silence. Holly's face had gone completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Really? Because I have recordings of your phone calls planning the whole thing. Pretty elaborate scheme, Holly. $500 to hire an actor, rehearsing his lines, timing it perfectly with the objection part of the ceremony. Very thorough." I could see Holly looking around desperately, probably trying to figure out how to salvage her plan, or at least minimize the damage. "Marcus is there somewhere, isn't he?" I continued, probably confused about why the ceremony hasn't started. "You should probably call him off before he creates a scene for nothing." "Amber, please," Holly's voice cracked. "Can we talk about this? I can explain." "Actually, we can't," I said, and I meant it. I'm done, Holly, completely done. David and I are married, we're happy, and we're moving on with our lives. Without you. You can't just cut me out. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided to try to destroy my wedding. Family doesn't do what you've been doing, Holly. Family doesn't hire actors to humiliate each other in public. I could hear Holly starting to cry, but for the first time in my life, her tears didn't make me want to fix everything for her. Instead, I felt nothing but relief that this conversation was finally happening. I was trying to protect you, she said through her sobs. David isn't right for you. I could see things you couldn't see. I was trying to save you from making a mistake. By sleeping with him? By hiring someone to lie about me? That's protection? I never slept with him. He rejected me every time I tried. I thought maybe if you saw that, he didn't really want you. Holly, stop. I cut her off before she could dig herself deeper. I know exactly what you were doing because I've been recording your phone calls for weeks. I know about every scheme, every manipulation, every attempt to break us up. I have evidence of all of it. The line went quiet except for Holly's crying. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady and calm. David and I are leaving for our honeymoon on Monday. When we get back, your stuff needs to be out of my house. All of it. I'll leave your things with Sarah, and after that, we're done. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You're 25 years old, Holly. Figure it out. But I don't have anywhere. You should have thought about that before you decided to try to ruin my life. Actions have consequences, and these are yours. I looked across the street at Holly, still standing in her blue dress among our confused wedding guests, and felt something I'd never experienced before when it came to my sister, complete indifference to her problems. Goodbye, Holly, I said, and hung up the phone. David wrapped his arms around me as we watched Holly try to explain to our guests why there was no wedding happening. Some people left immediately, obviously annoyed at the wasted time. Others stayed to comfort Holly, who was now sobbing dramatically about family betrayal and abandonment. How do you feel? David asked as we walked back to our car. Free, I said, and meant it completely. For the first time since I was 16 years old, I feel completely free. We drove back to our hotel, ordered champagne from room service, and spent the evening planning our honeymoon activities instead of managing Holly's crisis. No emergency phone calls, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells around someone else's emotions. 2 weeks later, we returned from Ireland to find that Holly had moved out, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the spare key I'd given her 2 years earlier. Sarah reported that Holly had spent several days calling mutual friends and family members, trying to get them to convince me to forgive her and let her move back in. Everyone who knew our history told her the same thing. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. I never heard from Holly again directly, though I occasionally got updates through family friends. She moved in with a cousin in another state, got a job at a restaurant, and apparently spent a lot of time complaining about how I'd abandoned her after everything she'd been through. 5 years later, David and I have a beautiful marriage, a house we bought together, and a life free from constant drama and manipulation. Sometimes people ask if I miss having a sister, and the honest answer is no. I miss the sister I thought I had when we were kids, but I don't miss the person Holly became. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family drama and setting boundaries. Remember, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and you shouldn't sacrifice your own happiness trying. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Thank you for listening, and remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who truly support your happiness and growth, not the ones who try to tear you down.